open your Bible to the Book of Esther. Today we're going to finish this series of messages. We learned of Esther in the last week. We left Haman furious with terrible plans, and when King Xerxes, the Esther's emissaries came to take Haman to the second banquet of Esther. And remember that Haman, who was the first prime minister, he was very powerful, the first minister of Xerxes. He was a descendant of Agag, and he was the traditional enemy of the people of Israel. And Mordecai, who was the descendant of Saul, the first king of Israel, and so they had a long history of feud because Saul lost his kingdom because of so there was a contention between them from generations before. They had bad blood from way back. And so Haman, he's the first minister. What was the country? When I say, what is the country, you're supposed to answer. Haman was the first minister of what country? Of Persia. Of Persia. And what was the name of the king? Ahasuerus or Xerxes, and he married a beautiful young Jewess called Esther. Okay, that you know. Okay. So Haman, he was very angry. If you're just coming in today, he was furious with Mordecai because he would never bow down to Haman. He would never pay him homage like other people. Everybody was a flatterer, and they would brown-nose Haman, but not Mordecai. This would leave him furious. So much so that Haman, not only did he want to kill Mordecai, but he wanted to kill all of his people, all of the Jews. He was a person like Hitler. Maybe they're from the same tree. Because Hitler hated and wanted to destroy all the Jews from the world. So this was the plan. Haman wanted to kill all of the Jews in the empire, the Persian Empire. It was the world empire at the time. So at the time, it was suggested to him that his wife suggested that to present a plan to the king, Xerxes, in the 12th month of, and what would be our month of March or April, that he would do, because their year was different than ours. So that on this day, all of the people of the whole Persian Empire could kill the Jews, and it would be no crime. It would be an extermination of Jews like they were roaches or any plague. The same thing as Hitler did. This was the law. So this was given a whole year, so that they could plan for this. All of the enemies of the Jews, they could get it together there, and they could make a massacre in the Persian Empire. So the king, he was kind of crazy and maybe drunk because he liked to drink. He agreed with that, and he said, "Go ahead, and I'll let you do it, and I'll stamp it." So they sent the letters and communication to all of the provinces of the Persian Empire. So Mordecai found out this, and he told Esther, and Esther was afraid, but with pressure from Mordecai, she went before the king with a lot of courage, and she actually risked her life to come before the king without his permission. And the king extends his scepter, and she made her request. And what was her request? And she said, "Come to supper for me." And Xerxes thought she was going to ask for a palace or something like that, or a credit card, but no, she only asked for him to come to a banquet. And we talked about preparing the heart, and you need to prepare the ground, the heart of the people before sometimes you make the invitation. You can't come very thirsty to the well. So we need to be careful even with our neighbors, and use your dirty money, as it were, the money that you have in your pocket, and use it to buy friends in heaven. What does this mean? God wants that you have good relationships and make friends with the people that you work with, where you live, so that you, at the right time, you can invite them to become Christian, or to evangelize them, or to church, or sometimes just invite them to accept Christ. So part of our role as Christians is taking care of our relationships, and this is part of your offering to God. You can't fight with your friend, you can't fight with your neighbor and call him all kinds of names, and then next week say, by the way, I'd like to invite you to church next week, so that you would come to know Jesus. You can't let the dogs loose on your underling, and then later, oh, by the way, here I have a little invitation for you. It doesn't work that way. So God wants you to prepare the ground, prepare the heart. So Esther prepared the king's heart, and he said, I'll give you up to half the kingdom. And she said, no, I just want you to come to the banquet that I prepare for you, and also bring Haman. And Haman was so proud and so arrogant that he was blind. If he had any sense, he should have known that Esther was planning something. And he began to think that he was really cool and handsome, and so maybe he thought he was so dumb because of his arrogance. And how many people, when you get arrogant, you make terrible decisions and have terrible attitudes, and you do stupid things, and the arrogance and hate are terrible things. They make you stupid. And Haman was very stupid. And he went to the banquet. It could have been the night of his death, but she wanted to develop the plan more. And so at the end of the banquet, the king, he's had quite a bit of wine. He said, "Oh, my love, and what is your request? And I know you didn't bring me here just for supper." Of course, when the woman treats the man very special, the man already knows that maybe she got a ticket, or she had a wreck, or something. Something's coming, and the man's already suspicious when there's lots of flowers on the table. What happened? So the king said, "What is your request?" And she said, "My request, O king, is another banquet. I want to have another banquet with you, and bring Haman." And Haman, boy, he's dumb. He didn't see the train coming because of his prejudice and because of his hate and his bitterness. He didn't see that it was a train coming to run over him. So Haman, when he left, when he went to go home, he passed, and guess who was there in front of the palace? Mordecai. And Haman's heart just filled with hate and bitterness, and he went home and he told his wife about all of the banquet and how great it was. But he said, "When I saw Mordecai there, it just destroyed everything, took all of my joy. That guy, I hate him, and that rat, Mordecai, He disrespected me, dishonored me. He didn't bow down. He didn't honor me. And it destroyed everything. It ruined my night. And his wife, he said, what's up? You're the second most powerful man in the world. Anything you ask the king, he'll give you. Ask for the head of this man Mordecai, and prepare a gallows here, and go tomorrow and say, here, let me destroy him. And so Haman thought it was a great idea, and so he had the people come, and they were going to make a gallows and 60 feet tall, and so that his body would be up in the air for people to see, and the vultures eating his body. He wanted for everyone to be afraid of him. So while he was waiting to destroy the Jewish people a year later. So while he is planning this that night and elaborating his gallows, God was working in the heart of Xerxes. God is always working. You may not know, you may not. Did you know that the name of God is not even mentioned in Esther? But even then, God is working. Even when you don't see, God is working in your life. And He's preparing, He's changing the things so that at the right time, and He pulls the card from his sleeve, And so Haman, the next morning, arrives at the palace early because he's wanting to ask for Mordecai's execution. But the king is already there, and he's waiting. He was there earlier because he hadn't even slept, because God had kept him up and given him insomnia, and he realized that night through reading of the records that he had never done anything for Mordecai, who had saved his life. So when Haman came and asked for Mordecai's head, actually it happened just the opposite. And when he was fixing to ask, the king said, just a second, there's somebody I want to honor. One of the most important people, and a friend of mine, and I owe him my life. And Haman, with his pride, he thought, of course it's me. When you have prejudice and when you have bitterness, you become stupid. You become blind. And here comes the train, but Haman wasn't able to see it. So immediately he thought, he's talking about me. And so I'm going to pretend like I don't know who he's talking about, and I'm going to elaborate a big ceremony, and when the king says, it's you, I'm going to, me? Listen to the Machiavellian plan. So he elaborates a plan with the horse of the emperor, with the clothing, the robe, and in the end, at the end, after he says all that, the king says to Haman, he says, this man is Mordecai, and you're the most important minister, and say it with me, this is the man that the king wants to honor. Wow. Humiliated. And Mordecai is on the emperor's horse with the robe and the crown and waving to the crowd. And Haman is just dying inside. He spends the day in the sun walking in front of the horse with Mordecai on the back. And he's walking. He went home. He's so furious that he's purplish. He's red in the face. His blood is boiling, and he's just. He gets home and he tells his wife what happened, and his wife said, "Wow. You know, if this is what's going on, there must be the gods behind this, and you're doomed." And one more time, Haman, here comes the train, but because of his prejudice and his stupidity, his bitterness. When you have hate and all of this rage, you don't see the things, all of these negative emotions, they make you blind and stupid. They leave you dumb. So the Bible tells us that when he was thinking about this and what he was going to do with the gallows, and he'd already started it and constructed it, he'd already made it, while he was proclaiming before Mordecai, they were building the gallows. It was over 60 feet high. And afternoon, he had a little bit of peace, and because he could look at the gallows, and he said, "Today I was humiliated, but he will pay with his life. Tomorrow," and right then is when the carriage comes to pick him up to take to Esther's banquet. So Esther served a beautiful banquet to the king and Haman. They went there, and when they were drinking, and the king once again said to Esther, "What is your request, Queen Esther? You will be attended. I will give it to you, even up to the half of my kingdom. I will give it to you." Now you're going to see a woman who's velvet outside, but she's steel. She's feminine. She's sweet and beautiful, but when it's time to defend her family, she's a jaguar. This is God's woman. She's a rod of iron. Esther, you're going to see this part of her character, this aspect. Everybody liked her, but now you're going to see her character, the spirit, the defender of her people, of her family. And she says in verse 3 of chapter 7, so the Queen Esther answered, "If I can count on your favor, and if this is what you want, then spare my life and spare my life of my people." And when she said this, the king goes, "What?" This is my request, and this is my desire, because my people and me were sold to destruction and slaves. If we'd only been sold as slaves, I wouldn't have bothered you. I would have been silent, because no affliction would justify perturbing the wonderful king. But it's a matter of death, of life and death. And the king says, the king answers. But let's pause for a minute, because I want to talk a little bit about this law. Take a look. The king also, probably a little drunk, when Haman wanted to make the law to destroy all of the Jews, he probably didn't think a whole lot. He had power. He was the government. He didn't think twice. It was going to please his prime minister, and prime minister asked for it. And apparently, he didn't investigate it and said, "Okay, all right, go ahead." I want to think a little bit, talk a little bit about the people who work in the government. The people who work in the different departments of the government. And there are people who think they're doing good, and sometimes Satan is working in the background. Sometimes the inspectors, an inspector came here who came to do an audit, and an inspector came completely out of his area of expertise, and it was a brother, but he didn't have good sense. He didn't. But he said, "I wanted to help the church. I wanted to help the church." How is a fine helping the church? I didn't say, "Are you crazy?" But I say it to you now. You know, the churches that are none of the governments, they don't start out with prohibiting the churches from existing. They start by regulating and about sanitary conditions, about this is how it works, about regulating the activities and the conditions. And sometimes people don't realize that they're being used by Satan. So if you're a inspector and you're one of the government agents who regulates these things and enforces them, let me tell you a story about those let me tell you about a case who the person gave me permission to tell this story. One of the big multinational companies here in our city. And the person said, they could tell me the name, but I won't tell the name. They went there to inspect the company. They wanted to protect the health of the workers. You know, there's a law. There are a lot of laws. Sometimes these laws were made to close down businesses that the government doesn't like. I know because I had a friend who who worked in the government, and a lot of the laws don't even go through Congress. They're made by technicians at a lower level. It's the application of the larger laws, and so sometimes it's 2 or 3 people who just come up with the ideas. And he would tell me, you have no idea how these laws sometimes are made. And he told me a story. About 25 years ago, the governor said, you know, this company over here, they didn't help my campaign, and you go over there and close them down because I don't care how. Find a law that will fine them, whatever, until they go bankrupt and close their doors. You understand? So this lady, this inspector, went to this multinational, and she came to a department. There were 38 people working on an assembly line there. Their work was this. They had a conveyor belt, and they would turn around and pick up a piece that weighed about 15 pounds and turn around and put it on the conveyor belt, and it would continue on. And she took a look at that, and she thought, that's too much, too intense. There's no way you can change. It was only out of her mind, only in her mind. She thought that 7 kilos or 15 pounds was too much, and it was repetitive. It was a repetitive motion. It might cause problems in their health later on. And so she applied a very strong, very high fine against this company. And she told them, I'll be back in 30 days, and it better be fixed. And 30 days later, she came back, and she got there and said, I want to see that section, that area. She got there, and there was an empty room with robots. She looked at the manager and said, where are all those people that worked here? They were all fired. They were all let go. She started crying. She just melted. 38 families were without a way to support their families because of lack of good sense. And we know that there are a lot of the inspectors, there's a lot of leeway. They're given a lot of authority to the inspectors and the people who enforce the laws. We're almost like the people in the Roman Empire. You have a lot of authority, but be very careful. Remember always in James chapter 3, remember this verse. I think it's verse 16 is James. It's a verse that not very many people know. In the end of the Bible, end of the New Testament. James chapter 2, 13 says, because you will be judged without mercy all of those who were not merciful. Listen to me. God is talking to you who have this authority and this task of judging and of inspecting, whether you're a judge or whether you're an inspector, an agent, because he will be judged without mercy, he who had no mercy. Second, he doesn't end there, because mercy triumphs over judgment. So whenever you're in this position, try to help. She might have come and said, let's try to find a way to change this. No, she came right away and fining. But in every, there's a benefit for the inspector when they find somebody. If you work in one of these companies or one of these departments in the government, remember this verse, James. Mercy will always triumph over justice. Yes, you need to be just. Don't accept bribes. Don't expect extortion. But think of the people and think of the companies and try to do good. They're the ones who provide the jobs. There was a company came from Santa Catarina to here, and somebody had applied a fine completely wrong. And he said, I don't care if this company closes. I'm not worried about it. He's not there for the good of the people. He's not good for there for the good of the Amazonian people. They sent him back to his own country. This was the inspector. So the king, back to Xerxes, he was causing genocide and massacring people, and he hadn't even thought about it. So let's continue the story. When he was thinking about these, the carriage came and picked up Haman, and they went to Esther's palace, and they ate and they drank, and in the middle of the banquet, in the middle of the banquet, he says, Esther, what is your request? It's like this. Somebody wants to kill me and my people. And Xerxes, in verse 5, he said, who is this terrible person who would do this, and where is he? And here's the courageous woman. Here you see the velvet and steel woman. She said, the adversary and the enemy is Haman, this man. I imagine in my mind, and I think the food in Haman's stomach came back up at that point. And Haman became terrified in front of the king, and the king was furious, and he stood up and went out into the garden. And since Haman saw that he was condemned, he saw the handwriting on the wall, and he had seen the king had turned blue, and he said, this means death. And so he was imploring for his life, and Esther was reclining on the couch, and he was on his knees begging for his life, for mercy for his life. And the king said, are you going to take my wife? And Esther had done what we need to do. She had developed friendships with all of the people. Never pay never pay bribes and be unjust. Don't be part of the schemes because you're a person of character. You get the people. She had done this. She had developed her friendships, and all of the people, they loved her and they liked her. The guards and the people. And when they saw that the king was furious with Haman, he said, "Is he going to grab my wife?" And the guy already had a hood to put on. He probably had it in his pocket. "Here you go, king." And so he placed it over the head of Haman, and he said, "There's a gallows out there." And the king said, "And by the way, king, there's a gallows out there about 70 feet tall." And he said, "Go ahead, put him on it." And Esther explained, and the king said, "Bring Mordecai here." And that night, Xerxes made Mordecai the prime minister. So the one who was going to die became victorious, and the one who was on the top of the pile died. This is how God does things. He's always working in the background. Don't just obey. How many people have destroyed the plan just because they didn't wait in faith, waiting for God? So it's like the saying where you swim and you swim and you swim and you die just before you get to shore. And there was a woman here who had 2 or 3 children, and there were a lot of things wrong in her life. And she heard something from a, quote, prophetess, and she began to, she left the church. And the week that she left the church, there was a person who had been going to buy a house for that lady. So be patient. God is in control. The Bible says in Psalm 37, the whole psalm, but when you're precipitous, you make mistakes, continue to pray, continue to be faithful. His plan is always going to turn the tables, and you will end up on top. Don't forget this. This moment difficult that you're passing, maybe health, or maybe your economies, maybe your financial situation. I don't know what the dark place that you are, but joy comes in the morning. Tomorrow comes when God is going to work. God has a plan. You're a son. You're a son. God has a plan for you. Okay? Haman was hanged on his own gallows, and Mordecai left the palace with the royal colors and a scarlet tunic. And he came out of there with a crown on his head, with the signet ring of the king, and Esther knelt before the king in tears and said, "Be merciful to my people. They want to kill my people. Undo the law." And the king said, "I can't undo the law, but I will do this. Come, bring Mordecai here, and we'll make a law where they can defend themselves." There are a lot of people who are against President Bolsonaro because he's wanting to arm the citizen. And support this, people. God teaches this in His Word, that the human needs to have the right and the power to defend himself. You're never going to take the guns away from criminals. It's the criminals who have more guns even more than the police many times. And this is only going to change when the citizens are policemen, as it were, or the government puts a policeman to walk around beside me. And you know that's not going to happen. So, or he can put a policeman, quote, we're not going to become the Old West. In every country where the citizenry was armed, the crime went down. There in Switzerland, there the crime is down. They're armed by law. There, men don't hit their women because they only hit once. I've heard this argument, for example, because the people here drink a lot. A lot of people drink worldwide, but when the drunk knows that the other guy is armed, then he's more careful. You know, you hear about these massacres in churches, and you know where they are? You know where these things happen? Where it's a gun-free zone. It's the places where there are guns. It's not where it happens. There were 13 students killed in a school in the U.S. There was another school. There were 30 or 40 students who were saved because one of the professors had a gun. And when he saw the person who came in to kill the students, he shot the terrorist. Did you hear that in the media? Did you hear that in the news? No, because they want it to be like Haman, because they have power and they have in these situations. You have to obey the laws. You have to know that you're not giving guns to criminals, but your army. In Genesis, that the government needs to honor the life and value the life of each person, the individual, because they're made in the image of God. And any government that doesn't honor that and doesn't believe that is going to be in chaos. And you know why we're in the trouble that we're in? Because there's blood on the streets because nothing happens to the criminals. So, yes, the government needs to arm the citizens, and every man and every woman needs to know how to shoot a gun and take a gun responsibly. But the media won't do this. In 2 years, we could turn this country around. The news doesn't want you to be strong. The media, they want you to depend on them. So God has raised a governor and a government that is different. And so if an assaultant, robber, burglar comes into your house, the Bible says kill him. It's not wrong. Now, if he's running from you, let him run from you. But if he's coming onto your house, he's coming into your house, then God declares you innocent. Are you listening to me? Sometimes the Christians are sometimes, forgive the word, but stupid. Even pastors. The Bible talks about all of these things. That's why he tells us in stories like Esther. Self-defense is to be encouraged, and the government needs to provide the opportunity for the people who are governed to be strong, to defend themselves, just as the criminals. So if they have a shotgun, then you need a cannon. You need to be able to defend yourself. I'm appalled when I tried to get pepper spray. It's against the law, but of course the criminal can pull a gun and shoot me. So praise God that things are changing, and pray that things continue to change. So let's continue the story. So Haman was hanged, and all of the palace and all of Haman's riches and authority were given to Mordecai. And so Mordecai, he made a new law to all of the countries, and the laws were sent to all of the provinces by horseback, and this is how they sent out messages communicated. So the news need to arrive at the end of the kingdom in one day by horseback. So the limits of the Persian Empire, if you calculate it, it's one 24-hour by horseback with relays of horses. So this is a true story. So Mordecai, he wrote a law and gave the Jews the right to defend themselves, and he even gave money to the Jews if you needed arms, if you needed ways to defend themselves, you could assemble themselves to make militia and defend themselves against their enemies. Okay, 10 months later, in 14 of Adar, this was the day that the destruction of the Jews, and the Jews attacked their enemies, and they killed 75,000. Just in Shush, remember what the Susa is called? Shush. And at the end of the day, the king came to the queen and said, 500 died here. I haven't heard how many died other places, but what else can I do for your people? She said, because she said 500 died, including the 10 children of Haman, and she said, I want them impaled and hung up on poles. And now you begin to see the iron of Esther. When punishment is executed in a way that nobody sees it, it doesn't inhibit crime. It doesn't. So when there are groups of extermination, so it needs to be public, and the capital punishment needs to be public, and this will create fear in the heart of the people who are criminals. Yes, it does. People say no, but this is proven. It has to be a punishment that is clear for the people to be afraid. So Esther said, I want all of them hung, so that everybody who sees that if you mess with Mordecai, you're going to end up like this. And she said, what else, my queen? So a lot of people had hidden, and I'd like to extend the period, so they killed another 300 more. And I like this verse here. It's very interesting. In the end of chapter 8, so many of the people who were part of different peoples, they became Jews because of the fear of the Jews. So, in other words, the people began to see that the God of the Jews has overturned the tables, and I want to be part of His people. So if you're here, I want to be. How can I become part of this church? Go to One with God. There are 3 3 different sessions. There's 8:30, 10:30, and 7:30 at night. So you can become part of the army of God. Ephesians 3, verse. Let's see if I wrote it down. I used your pen to write it down, but where? And it says this, but we also were included in Israel when we accepted Christ. We Gentiles were included in the nation of Israel when we accepted Christ. So the people of God today are the people who accept Jesus, and you can do this also. You can become part of God's people, believing in His work. You can have eternal life and forgiveness of sins. You can become part of the people of God and the family of God. Mordecai, next day, made a new law and sent it to all the kingdom. And now on the 15th day, the next day, after the execution of all of the enemies of God's people, now the law said it's a day of feasting and celebration. So everybody, every day, is going to be, every year it's going to be celebrated, and it's called the Day of Purim. And so Haman had, so Purim is, even today the Jews still continue celebrating. This year it was on the 20th of, it changes because the Jewish calendar is a little different. But this year it was on the 20th, the 6 o'clock in the afternoon until the 6 o'clock in the afternoon of verse 21. So this tradition is continuing even in today from Esther. And to celebrate, and I made amastash to celebrate a little bit. Osnei Haman is the other name of it. It's a little cookie. It looks like a little hat or a little ear. I'm going to let a few people try it. I'm going to give one to you, and you're going to share with those around you. So everybody can have just a little piece. So share with the people around you. Here's one for you. One for you. There you go. You can eat, see if you like it. Here you go. Share with your mom there. Do you want to eat one of these? He was in the second services. No, there's no anointed here. Let's see here. One over here, one for you. I want to give for all different ages. I'm going to give to this lady. She didn't even ask. Now let's go over to the other side here. The other side is so sad. The other side is sad. Oh my. Later I'll give you the recipe. There you go. There you can share with the teens around you. Did you all have in the first services? No? There you can share with your friends. You can share there. And now I'm going all the way over to the other side here. There's one for your family. There's for this family. There you go. It seems like you want one. It's like the people are wanting a blessing, huh? Now I'm going over here.
Aqui para essa família aqui.
For this family here,
E mais
one
aqui.
more.
Aqui, pronto. E o último para cá. Pronto.
Last one here.
Pronto. Acabou.
Okay,
Acabou.
it's
Agora
done.
só a
All
receita,
gone.
tá?
Now just the recipe.
Leva 1 hora mais ou menos para fazer isso aí.
Takes about an hour to make it.
Bem simples.
Very simple.
Agora deixa eu falar.
Now let me tell you.
Osnei Haman.
Ojnei Ama is the name, and it's the ear. It's Haman's ear, because before hanging him, they would cut the ears off. After the Middle Ages, the Jews thought it was too bloody, so they changed the name. So they changed it to Amatash, which is the hat of Haman. May God bless you, and don't forget, in your darkest hour, God is still in control. He's behind the curtains, even when you don't see him. He has a plan. He's working in your life. Don't forget the meditation. May God bless.